Welcome to the season finale of the Unwanted Matter miniseries. This miniseries was written and narrated by Matt Spear and published with the help of Junior Art Lab. Episode 5, All or Nothing. Deep in the depth of space, a flash of blinding light appears as Hunter 1 slowly escorts the brothers into the temple of the Master. Mark cannot believe what is happening. A few minutes ago, they were actually winning against the Hunters. However, Hunter 1 managed to gain the upper hand and teleported them away. The main idea of their previous plan was that if they could stop the Hunters, then they would be safe from the Master. However, that had all come apart. Their only hope now is to use their powers to defeat the Master. Hunter 1 leads them up the broken brick staircase to the temple. Mark and Stephen can feel a strong, angry energy coming from the temple chamber. It feels like the strongest rage they have ever felt before. The air around them feels still and clear of any water. As they walk up the steps, the low rumble coming from inside the temple chamber gets louder. As they reach the top of the steps, Hunter 1 pushes them into the chamber. The door slams shut behind them. Mark and Stephen feel like they are being drowned in heavy water. Hunter 1 steps up. "Master, I give you the brothers." A flash of blinding light appears before their eyes as a hissing noise screeches out. It sounds like the screech from the rock, only much louder and much more intense. "Mark and Stephen," the Master hisses slowly, "I have been waiting for you. Excellent job, Hunter 1. Your freedom shall now be restored. You have fulfilled your purpose to me, and your use has passed. You shall now be free in death." Hunter 1's neck begins to crack. His bones begin to crumple inside him as his shiny armor falls off of him. On Earth, the same thing is happening to the other two hunters. John stares up at the blinding light. He has been lied to all along. He should never have made this deal with the Master. All the souls he has been responsible for the deaths of. On Earth, Hunter 2 and 3 fall to their ground, their armor gone and their bones cracked. Victoria runs to their aid, but it is no use. They are gone. Hunter 1 screams out to the brothers, "We made a mistake! Go for the walls of the temple. He's most vulnerable there. One of the victims was actually once able to break a piece off of it." With a final snap, Hunter 1 falls to the ground. Mark's eyes widen. He has never felt fear like this before. The hunters that he and Stephen had so much trouble defeating were just destroyed within a matter of seconds with so little effort. He glances at Stephen. They clearly underestimated the Master's powers all along. Mark's heart feels like it's about to beat from his chest. It beats with a fear so strong it could not be described. Stephen takes deep breaths, his lungs filling with crushed and intense air. Mark holds out his hands, just as Hunter 1 informed him to. He needs to destroy the temple's matter. However, no matter what Mark does, the temple will not disappear. Mark tries as hard as he can, but it is no use. Nothing is happening. A blood-curdling laugh comes from the Master. "Did you think this was a fight you could win? Your powers are nothing against me." At that moment, white mist screeches out of the side of the temple walls and makes contact with the brothers. The brothers scream as their flesh peels off. Mark has never felt such pain before. It was as though every cell in his body was bursting apart. Stephen holds out his hands. 4 small walls and a roof appear around the brothers. The mist scrapes on the side of the wall, but it is not able to get in. While the brothers are grateful for this, the Master is only amused. "This does not change anything. I will get through. and make you suffer for all the trouble you have caused me. Mark collapses on the ground. The relief from the mist was so strong, it could not be compared. Stephen is holding onto the side of the wall, preventing himself from falling to the floor. Mark shakes without control. His heart has never beaten this fast before. The amount of fear Stephen felt with Billy was nothing compared to that of the Master. Their encounters with the hunter have paled next to this. My power did not work against it, Mark exclaims. We need to fall back. Come up with a plan, Stephen suggests. Mark stands up. No, we just need to hit the walls with something strong enough to destroy them. The wall Stephen created begins to crack as the mist slowly shoots in. Stephen holds his hand onto the wall. The hole fills in just as more mist shoots in, creating more holes. Stephen screams at the pressure of holding back the mist. It is as though he has just run for 5 days straight with no rest. We have to go, Stephen squeals. Mark looks at Stephen. He's in such agony. Worry flows through Mark. Stephen's right. Stephen, the Master is sensitive to flashing light. If you can create a camera, we might be able to distract him long enough to escape. Stephen nods. Slowly, he points his hand towards the ground. More mist enters through the walls. Stephen's insides feel like they're swelling as he slowly creates the camera. Mark grabs it just as Stephen falls to the ground. The strain is too much. The walls disappear as the Master levitates the brothers into the air. Now you will die. The mist touches the brothers' skin once more as blood drips off of them and onto the floor. The screeching from the Master disappears momentarily as the blood is absorbed into the floor. The screeching resumes just as Mark takes a picture and blinding white light flashes over the room. The mist stops shooting as the temple door opens. The brothers fall to the ground. Pain rushes through them. However, this is no time to stop. Mark runs to the door, but Stephen is still lying on the ground unconscious. Mark runs back towards him and picks him up. His back aches from the pain of holding Stephen. The door to the temple begins to close. Mark sprints towards it. His legs are on fire. The door is halfway closed. With everything Mark has, he dashes through the doorway just as it closes. The Master waits inside the temple. He knows the brothers cannot get off the planet and that they will be back. One way or another, the brothers will be destroyed. Mark continues running as fast as his legs can carry him. He is panting breathlessly. His legs burn, but he does not dare stop. Fear still grips inside him. How could they have been so overconfident? How could they have thought they could take the Master head on? That was too close. Mark runs through the fields of dead grass, the grass cutting and scraping against his legs. Mark looks up at the sky. He can see space from the ground he's on. The stars and the sun, but no earth. He's a very long way from home. If only he had never touched that rock. Then he would still be at home, partying at weddings while taking pictures. He would not have to constantly fear for his life. However, despite everything that has happened, he and Stephen would not have become as close as they did. Even though they were hunted by an ancient particle energy and their group of hunters and had to escape from a crazy CIA director, he and Stephen had gone through many unique adventures together. They had spent so much time together that was truly irreplaceable. Mark feels like he is at the point of collapse. He lets Stephen down and falls to his knees. A tear falls from his eye and disappears into the hard soil. He takes a deep breath and exhales slowly. The air smells so strongly of stale milk. He glances down at Stephen and smiles. He brought Stephen into this, and now he's going to get him out. There must be some way to defeat the Master. Obviously, he's sensitive to flashing light. However, it's not enough to defeat him. His power did not work on the walls, and Stephen's did not fare much better. However, Hunter 1 said that someone was once able to break off a piece of the temple. There must have been something that he had to do so. But what? Mark thinks back to his encounter with the Master. The Master seemed to have the upper hand on them until Mark took the picture. He had gotten out the camera, Then the screeching stopped for a moment. Then Mark took the picture. Why did the screeching stop? Mark closes his eyes. Mark remembers seeing the master's energy. Stephen was lying on the ground, while blood dripped off them and fell onto the floor. Then the screeching stopped. Mark's eyes snap open. A surge of hope flows through him. The blood calls the master to stop. Maybe if they put enough blood into the wall, then it will kill the master. Beside Mark comes a groan. It is Stephen. He is still very dizzy and feels like he's been run over by a truck. Mark helps him up while explaining his discovery. It makes sense, Stephen agrees. If the master is all solute, then that would make the blood a solvent. It is possible that when they become a solution, the blood reacts negatively with the energy. And that would also explain how the person was able to break off a piece of the temple. The blood must have fallen in some of the holes. The only question is, how do we get the blood? Stephen asks. Mark considers this as well. Stephen's stomach twists. He dares not admit the truth, but he has to. One of us may have to sacrifice ourselves. This was the option that came to Mark's mind as well. Hearing Stephen say the words brought a shiver up his spine. It is clear that only one of them is leaving this planet alive. I will do it, Stephen says. No, you can't. You still have so much to do in your life, Mark. Tell Victoria I'm sorry. In that moment, Stephen begins running towards the temple. Mark begins to shake in fear. It can't be Stephen. It has to be him. Mark runs after Stephen. He cannot get to that temple. Mark holds out his hand, and the ground right in front of Stephen disappears. Stephen stops running and holds his hand towards Mark. A gigantic wall appears right in front of him, separating the two. Stephen holds his hands towards the ground, and it reappears. He continues running. With each step, he dreads getting closer to the temple. He has to get there before Mark arrives. He has to save him. Fear grips at him. He can hardly believe what is going to happen to him. Eventually, Stephen arrives at the temple of the Master. As he runs up the jagged and broken steps to the temple chamber, he begins to feel incredibly nauseous. It is as though he's going to throw up. He slowly steps inside the temple chamber, and the door slams shut instantly. The screeching, hissing noise begins to come from the temple. I have been awaiting your return. It is time for your meaningless souls to be consumed. Stephen opens his hand, and a knife forms inside of it. It's just me. Then who do you think is standing behind you? Stephen does not even need to turn around. He already knows it's Mark. Somehow, he must have gotten over the wall and beat Stephen to the temple. Stephen runs the tip of the blade over his wrist. Blood begins to flow down it and onto the knife. Stephen attempts to ram the knife into the wall. However, the master stops him with the sheer force of telekinesis. Did you not think I would be prepared for that? I am always watching. I am in your thoughts. Your efforts have been amusing, but now the end is at hand. Now you will face defeat. Both of the brothers are then levitated into the air. White mist begins to shoot from the temple walls and touches the brothers. The pain they had felt before returns, and the brothers scream. Their skin has dissolved so that only the flesh remains. Ahead of them, the light shines even brighter than ever, and a silhouette of a person begins to form inside of it. The flesh of the brothers peel off, and only their bones and some blood is remaining. For Mark and Stephen, the pain is unbearable. It is unlike anything they have ever felt before. It is unlike anything that can ever be described or imagined. In front of them, they watch as the sill house descends to the ground and begins walking towards them. They failed. The master had a physical form. Stephen glances over at Mark. Mark looks back to Stephen. Their bones begin to dissolve. I'm so sorry, Mark. I never should have treated you the way I did. I'm sorry as well. But you must go home. Before Stephen can ask why, Mark holds his hands towards him. You have a family. Your son needs you. Take care of him. Get home safe. Mark, no! In front of them, the master walks into sight as a person. At last I have a physical form. Be thankful, for your powers have now been used for something greater. The universe will fall before my intense power. They shall worship me as their master. Mark causes his skeleton to disappear, and blood splatters everywhere across the temple. The temple begins to shake. Power holding Stephen in the air vanishes, and he falls to the ground. He looks at his hand, which the flesh is growing back on. The master stumbles. He cannot fail now. He has come all this way. The skin has grown back onto Stephen, and the pain is gone. Tears fill his eyes. His chest burns at the pain of Mark. The master's physical form begins incinerating within itself. With a burst of light, he is gone, and the entire temple crashes above Stephen. A flash of blinding light appears before his eyes, and when he reopens, he is right back in the house of Dr. Kango, where Hunter 1 teleported him away. Victoria stands in front of him. Are you all right? Stephen looks up. Mark is gone. Stephen walks towards Victoria. He hugs her, with tears filling his eyes. He tries to hold back the tears, but it's no use. A few months before, Stephen never would have thought Mark would have done what he did. A few months before, Stephen could hardly stand the thought of dealing with his brother. Now, he would do anything to get him back. The two of them may have had their differences, but at the end of the day, they cared about each other. Through everything they faced, whether it be protecting themselves against the hunters or escaping from John Cassador, who is now facing trial, they were there for each other. And Mark proved that to Stephen by sacrificing himself. As Stephen lay down flowers over Mark's grave shortly after his funeral ended, Stephen could not help but think of the adventure they went through. For better or worse, when Mark touched that rock that night, he had set them up on an adventure. Maybe it was always meant to be that way. I'm so sorry, Mark. I'm so sorry. Slowly, Stephen walks away from the tombstone and heads towards Victoria and Billy. The tombstone reads, Mark, the best brother anyone could ask for. As Stephen and his family walk away, and the sun begins to set along the cemetery, the squirrels rustle the trees as the owls coo, and as the gold glimmer of sunlight shines against the tombstone, a shrill cry of Mark's voice comes right above the grave. Stephen! This concludes Season 1 of the Unwanted Matter miniseries. This miniseries was written and narrated by Matt Spear and published with the help of Junior Art Lab. Stay tuned for Season 2 of the Unwanted Matter miniseries to find out what happens next. This has been Season 1 of the Unwanted Matter miniseries.